This is Dr. Bob Greenberg, which these wonderful guys, John and Pete, are willing to call me. And this is the Break It Down Show.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John and Pete.
This is Danny.
This is Lily, and you're listening to the Break It Down Show.
That's right. We actually, one of my friends growing up, he's finishing up a tour with the Eagles, and he's part of the backstage crew, and he's basically responsible for making sure all the guys have their little home away from home in whatever place they're in.
Well, that's fun. He gets a mile on this.
He's got great tales to tell. And
he's got to know where every Costco is.
Every Costco, everywhere.
He's got to know where every Costco in the universe.
Exactly.
And when he starts to explain it, it's like, when they want a red couch, it's okay. They get to have a red couch because they got to perform that night, and everything's got to be right because
once before we all die.
Yeah.
We should want a red couch.
Sure.
Someone should deliver it.
Yes.
Sure. Okay, Dan, this is not being quiet, honey, while we're doing this. I know, honey. Excuse me. The battlefield will end soon. As soon as Nancy gets home,
it's fine.
Okay.
We've got kids. Look, there's Brenna.
Oh, there's
we're
Brenna, who just
both
graduated
veterans
from high school. Excuse me.
We're veterans of the kid experience.
Oh, I went to school in Georgia.
In Georgia? Whoa.
Yeah.
So you're home.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, she moved out here. It's the first time we lived in the same state since 2003.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's a long way away. Where were you?
I said it.
I'll be going to Georgia actually for the first time. I've never been to Georgia.
You've never been to Georgia?
Except to drive through.
Okay.
But I'm doing some. I'm going to Emory in October to work with the.
Nice.
To work with the program.
In Atlanta, huh?
Yeah, or wherever. Yeah, Emory's in. I'm looking forward to it. It's a crazy program. Here you go. You want to know what's wrong with academia today?
Yeah, tell us.
Like all major universities, Emory has become so, I don't even know what the right term is anymore. They're so concerned with political programs that they can no longer teach in art or history or music the Western canon. That's seen now as a kind of betrayal of general humanity. And so for about 10 years, if you went to Emory, you couldn't take a course on Greek literature. Danny, you must stop, baby. No, I don't. If I ask you again, hon, I'm sending you down. Okay? To Alcatraz. Okay? Got it? Yeah, it's called your room. You couldn't take a course on Greek literature. You couldn't take a course on classical music. They stopped offering everything. Everything had to pass the test of the new morality. And so someone walked in and gave them $1 million to start a program that students could take voluntarily called the Western Humanities Program. So a student, a freshman or a sophomore, can voluntarily choose to be in this program where they can take humanities lectures with outsiders like me who are shipped in to spend a week with them, teaching them stuff that Emory isn't allowed to teach anymore. Now go the freak figure that out.
I'm glad that somebody came in, some philanthropist showed up and dropped $1 million on, all right, enough with this nonsense.
I mean, and who could believe such a thing? I mean, when this guy called me, and he's a fellow teaching company guy, so, I knew who he was, he knew who I was, and he contacted me, and I was very flattered to be asked, and I asked him about a program, and he explained to me what I just explained to you. I was flabbergasted. Excuse me.
Uh-oh.
Dan, honey, that's it, baby. Come on. Last case. Then Pelican Bay.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, Chino. There's no shirts in Chino.
Yeah. Pelican Bay. He's going to hang out with those guys who train those dogs,
Oh, boy.
Tree Frog. People named Tree Frog.
Tree Frog.
That's like dangerous people. Anyway, when this guy explained this story at Emory, I was flabbergasted. I mean, Emory is a major, major institution. And that they have had to kowtow to this nonsense, it's disheartening. It really is. And apparently this program is going great guns. They have to turn kids away.
Right.
Because that's what education's all about.
Yeah,
you know, you want to learn shit you don't know. That's why you go to school.
That's right. Yeah. And one of the things about school that's great we're saying this because Brenna is in our midst, and this is why I think of this. Although I'd like to say that I would have said this anyway, but since Brenna's sitting next to me, I'll say it because Brenna's here. When you go to school, that's exactly what you seek out. Because when you went to high school, you couldn't have the good stuff. So now you're in college and you get to dip your toe in the nastiness of art and literature and the experience of just, the stuff that happened out there that was captured.
Right. You can't poll people about what they don't know.
Right.
They'll say, I don't want to know that. I don't know it. I don't know anything about that. What am I interested in? So the only stuff they're going to respond positively to is this stuff they already know, which tends to be, trivial.
Worthless.
Well, if not worthless, then let's say not as interesting as the shit they don't know, because it's what we don't know that either hurts us or helps us.
Or absolutely fascinates us.
And reveals a whole new world that we didn't know existed otherwise. And because of that, boom, our brains expand and our worlds change.
That's right.
But if you base all of your decisions on what courses to make based on polling, you're doing exactly everything bass-ackwards. Mm-hmm. It's like asking a child, what do you want to learn? And my child will say, I want to learn how to break into the cookie jar without ever being caught. Mm-hmm. That's what he wants to know.
Yes.
I want to speak minion.
Correct. I'd rather teach him how to make a freaking cookie because that's going to profit all of us.
That's right.
But he's not interested in that, or so he thinks he's not.
Exactly.
So, you can't ask people what they think they want to know. You have to create something that's fascinating enough that when it exists, they embrace it.
Right.
I've bought teaching company courses. I knew about the company, wasn't going to pay the price for the courses, right? I accidentally got some Rufus Fears lectures. And that opened the door.
Good for you.
Yeah. And I bought courses that you've taught and went crazy, bought books that you referenced in those things. And then I tried other courses. I was willing to sample a whole lot more because, I found a course that really resonated with me.
I did exactly the same thing. I got involved in this organization and it built over time and more stuff was made. Well, heck, I wanted to hear this stuff too. I've got shelves and shelves and shelves worth of DVDs because I want the DVDs. I want to see you working.
Right.
I don't drive. I drive, but I don't commute. So I don't need to listen in my car. I want to watch you and see what you look like and see if you spray it when you say it. I mean, I'm interested in the whole gestalt thing.
That's right.
Yeah. And some of these people are wonderful and some of them aren't, but the topics are all fascinating. Yes. And I have to say the producers there, the people who actually work with you in the trenches, they are freaking amazing. They are the best of the best. They're like the people I used to work with at NPR. I mean, unbelievably dedicated, unbelievably clever, incredibly talented. And they make you look really better than you really are. And isn't that the key to a great producer?
Absolutely.
That's right.
Lovely.
And we're so happy to be here.
Well, yes, we are so happy to be here. We're at the lovely home of Dr. Bob.
I can't stop smiling.
And he served us martinis.
This is what I do. When people come into my home, you're offered the bathroom and you're offered martinis, and you can do them in any order you choose.
Both great things.
Yes.
Here's the thing that I would like to say about your home. It is decorated from one end to the other with a martini shaker collection that spans the world and probably the known universe.
Yeah, I have an illness. I'm the first to admit it. Collecting is a known illness. It's an attempt to surround yourself with objects that somehow are going to extend your life. But as I said to you gentlemen earlier this evening, since I was never into recreational drugs or cars, I had some disposable income, and I've always spent it on collecting stuff. And I've been collecting the shakers for about 30 years now.
Wow.
And it's a fun collection, and it's been used to illustrate a couple of books.
Wow.
The Williams-Sonoma Bar Guide used my shakers, and Barnaby Conrad III's, he's got a coffee table book called The Martini that uses my shakers as well. So that just feeds the illness.
Yeah. I mean, you've got an impressive array of them, and they span the taste, continuum you got Art Deco stuff, you got things from periods throughout Martini history.
Indeed. Mostly Art Deco, mostly, modern between the wars.
Yeah.
But there's some stuff that goes back to the 1880s.
Wow.
And some stuff from the 50s and even contemporary, because every now and then some contemporary design company like Restoration Hardware or Pottery Barn will put out some cool something.
Yeah.
And I see no reason why I shouldn't acquire that. I mean,
if they did it right.
Acquisition is the joy. Since I don't shoot lions.
Yeah.
Wow.
With GPS collars around their necks.
Yeah.
Instead, I shoot I shoot cocktail shakers. It's a frankly much more civil thing to hunt.
Absolutely.
Yes.
They also come out shinier.
Well, if you work on them, correct.
And these olives are divine.
Yeah, those are good.
My goodness. I got a little bead of sweat on the back of my neck.
Yeah. Those are Chipotle olives from the Santa Barbara Olive Company. And so I order them a case at a time.
Wow.
They are fantastic.
Yeah, they clear the nostrils.
Yeah.
So,
it's a lovely time. We're just getting started. We have a lot to talk about, but really nothing on the script. So we started our conversation with, if we go way back, we started our conversation when we walked in the door. We said, hey, we brought martinis. And then we looked at the Martini Museum that existed in front of us and went, oh, okay. But I'm glad at least that you showed off, the one that you did. What, can you tell us about the shaker that you used? Is it special?
Yeah, it is special. It is virtually the first shaker I ever got. The story is wonderful and I'll make it quick. So my first wife and I were married in 1981, and a couple of years later, her parents, who lived in Santa Rosa, were selling the house she grew up in.
What were you, 11?
Oh, I wish, dude, I wish, but I'm 61 now, so I mean, time. Time is the enemy of us all, whether we realize it or not. But anyway, her parents invited all four of their children, including my ex-wife, to come up and claim whatever they wanted because they were downsizing and moving on. So by the time we got there, the other three had already basically laid claim to anything that was worthwhile. We got there were two objects left. There was a gigantic freezer sitting in their garage, and there was this cocktail shaker, which they'd been given at their wedding, and they'd never used.
Wow.
And we were living in an apartment in South Berkeley at the time. She was a law student and I was finishing grad school. Where are we going to put a freezer, for goodness sake?
Right.
I mean, this is basically a device to kill small children that had no use for us otherwise. Nevertheless, she was already saying fra, as in freezer, when I said, the shaker. I want the shaker.
Ding, we have a winner.
Yeah, and she turned to me and she said, what do you want that for? And I said, it looks so cool. And I'll call my dad, who was in the booze and wine business, and I'll ask him what to do with it. So she did what she always used to do, which is why she's my ex-wife, and she smirked at me. But I took the shaker home to our little apartment in South Berkeley, and I called my dad back in New Jersey, and I said, Dad, what do I do with a cocktail shaker? He says, you make martinis. I said, how do you do that? He goes,
you know what he thought, though, as you asked him this question? Finally, the boy has asked me something important.
Of use. Yeah, correct.
Right.
Yeah. Correct. Not since I told him about prophylactics 15 years ago has he asked me anything
of importance.
Thank you. Yeah. So he says you get some gin and you get some vermouth and you get some olives and you make a martini.
Let's roll back for just a second. You said you get some gin.
Yeah.
That's quality parenting right there.
You know what? It is quality parenting, and it's definitely parenting of that era. As we talked about before, I'm prepared to make anything for anyone who comes into my house. You want a vodka martini? I'll do it. But my friends out there who drink vodka, understand, please, it is a disability. Not drinking gin is a disability. This is the fluid that represents the firm and powerful English people.
That's right.
People who stood up to the Luftwaffe, people who gave Goering the finger, people who lost their empire and nevertheless still are filled with aplomb and attitude. Excuse me, even though it's originally a Dutch fluid, it's the English who made it what it is today.
The gin and tonic, the drink that won the world.
Exactly. The tonic.
Saved us all from scurvy.
Yeah. Yes.
So anyway, yes, I do use gin. So my dad turned me loose. So I had no money at the time. I bought crappy gin, but I learned over time how to make these darn things.
Nice job, Elder Mr. Greenberg.
Elder Mr. Greenberg is 90 years old, and he's coming out here in September, and the first thing he's going to ask for is a martini.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
he's
terrific.
not going to be disappointed.
Yeah, he will not be disappointed.
You know, you'll have a million things on your mind, when your dad comes and visits you. But you know, if the thought crosses your mind and you think, you know what? I know a couple of guys would like to drink a gin martini with us, Dad. You give us a call.
John and Pete, you're on your way.
Yeah.
And their designated driver.
That's right.
Ah.
So far. We actually were teaching Brenna similarly about martinis, and we started out by talking about this is how you make one. It didn't used to be stirred all the time or shaken. It was stirred and over the rocks. And so we went through the whole process with her too. So she's learning. We could spend, if you allow me to, and you should not, you should cut me off the way a bartender throws a drunk out on the sidewalk. If you allow me to, this is all I will talk about because I've accumulated so much martini lore, so much information over the years because that's what collectors do. Right.
I thought we had music in common.
Yeah, there you have. Well, we have many things in common.
Yeah.
Apparently.
So you should probably 86 me right now on the martini stuff, and we should probably move on.
I do want to ask this: preferred gin to pour, the go-to bottle.
The go-to bottle is Bombay Sapphire. This week. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm a gin slut, and that is, I love whatever I'm with. And right now I'm with Bombay, and that's not been a brief affair. But I will tell you that I make a great Hendrix martini, and the Hendrix gin is wonderful, especially with a slice of cucumber in it, because it's got a little cucumber flavor in it. So instead of olives, I serve cucumber with my Hendrix.
Wow.
Beefeater is my old standby. And then, of course, there are so many designer gins, some of which are being made right here in the Bay Area.
That's right.
Which are wonderful.
Yes.
I mean, fantastic. I mean, the first one to do this designer gin that I know of was Fritz Maytag, who did a gin which was, I mean, this is the guy who is the heir. I've had dinner with Fritz. He is the heir to the Maytag appliance fortune. Mm-hmm. And it is a fortune. He's the great grandson of the founder of the company. And among the various things Fritz has done with his life is he's been a terrific music philanthropist. I don't know if you guys remember.
Thank you, Fritz.
Yeah.
I mean, there used to be a performing orchestra here in the Bay Area called the Anchor Players. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes. My dad he's got a degree in music, and that was some of the stuff that I was, pushed to consume.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, this is the Anchor Players.
Good job, Elder Mr. Turner.
Yes. Yeah. Elder is right. So my dad taught me martinis. Your dad taught you music. You win.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that it worked.
We're here together.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It was in there.
We're surrounded by winners.
It has to work. Nothing but winners. Exactly. Yeah. But anyway, so Maytag created this Anchor Players named after Anchor Steam Beer, which is a old San Francisco beer company from the 1850s or 60s that he bought and revived and recreated this steam process of making beer.
Thanks again, Fritz.
Brewery on Potrero Hill in San Francisco.
That's right.
And then he decided to get into gin. And so he created, over a long and laborious period, something that he called Junipero gin. And
I had no idea that was his.
That's his. Yeah. That's a Maytag product.
Okay.
And it's really great. And it's the first of the designer gins. And the name of it is freaking brilliant. It's just.
That's right.
It's like a triple entente.
It's right. That's right.
Because Junipero Serra.
Yeah, right, sure.
Was the
friar.
The friar, thank you. The Catholic friar who founded the San Francisco, the mission. Junipero means juniper. And juniper is the essential flavor of gin.
Sure.
And in fact, the original, the Dutch drink is still to this day, it's called Jenever, which means juniper.
Huh.
And Jenever, when it was brought by Charles, who became the king of England, but he had been the king of Holland. Mm-hmm. I think it was Charles II. When Charles became the king of England, because England desperately needed a Protestant king, So they brought him over from Holland. He brought Genever with him. And Genever was then called Yen and then called gin. So it's all Junipero, gin, Genever. It's all great. It was whoever thought of that was just way off the charts. Smart.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Great. Yeah.
We gave Brenna her education on the juniper berry and how the gin making process is essentially the liquor making process that comes from vodka, but the flavoring is what separates it, and the flavoring that comes from the juniper berry. And then we discussed the making of the martini, the making of the dry martini, the making of the perfect martini.
Yes.
And
Yes.
yeah. And I like mine a little dirty.
You do? You didn't tell me that.
Because I
yeah.
like I don't mind it.
I prefer my women
I don't mind
dirty,
it clean
but
too,
my
but I like
martini's
my
clean.
martinis
Thank
like
you.
I like my
Like
women.
your women, yes.
That's right. A little dirty.
Well, that's really good.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No need to apologize, but I realize this is also a training moment as well, because we're not the only guys who've ever hit the record button in the Greenberg household. So I know part of me wants to say, oh, he's fine. A little ambient noise never hurt anybody.
No, the ambient noise is no freaking good whatsoever, especially when you've told him he's going to Pelican Bay if he doesn't behave, you know?
That's right.
That's a long drive. I really am not prepared to do that tonight.
Yeah,
you know?
That's a long drive.
I'd rather not do that. If I didn't have to, if you'd keep me company, maybe we could like spell each other in the car, but otherwise, no.
Brenna's going to be encouraged to enjoy some of your courses, so that she's been to some theater. Make her go out and see that kind of stuff. But yeah, she can go anywhere. She can do anything.
What are you going to major in? What are you interested in? Oh, really? Oh man, the kids' grandparents, their grandmother, who kind of lives with us, she's not here tonight, is a career physical therapist. And that's what she's done. And she's like the most amazingly loving, caring, perfect person anyone has ever met. She's a visiting physical therapist. So for 40 years of her career, she retired last year. Her gig was to go to people's houses, usually people who were extremely infirm, who had just been in surgery or who couldn't get up or whatever, go into their houses and make their houses person friendly. That was a hard job. I took her to some ratty places. Wow. I mean, it's like a kind of Oakland urban Mother Teresa.
I listened to a podcast that belongs to Tim Ferriss. He has a fascinating podcast. His guests tend to be performers at their peak in whatever discipline. And one of the guys who he had on was a physician. Is a physician here in the Bay Area who is very knowledgeable about weightlifting and physical fitness. And he said that he started his college career looking for certification in physical therapy so he could become a therapist. And then he realized that the difference between the physical therapist education and the medical doctor education, for him, where he was, 2 classes.
2.
There were 2 classes difference.
0.
And in real life, it's really nothing. So, there you are.
Except that if you're a physical therapist, you work longer hours for much less money.
For much less money. Right.
Excuse me.
And I don't know if you can write prescriptions.
You know, when I got my PhD, my younger brother and he graduated from med school because med school's easy. It's 4 years. And I got my PhD after 6. So we graduated at the same time, me with my PhD and him with his MD. And so my mother was very proud because this is what mothers do. You know,
Right.
One gets a PhD, the other's an MD. Fine. This is what you talk about. What else is there to talk about?
Well, there's a party to throw.
Yeah. What else is there to talk about? And I still remember the story as it was. So my Aunt Rosie, everyone has an Aunt Rosie. Everyone has one of those shrunken prunes who's like 3'9", who over time has just become more concentrated in her bile, who nevertheless at the age of 80, whatever it is, still has that mind that's as sharp as a scalpel and a tongue that can slice through, molecular acid tongue. That was my Aunt Rosie. I loved her to death.
God
Oh,
bless her.
she was hot. She was hot, my Aunt Rosie. She'd get these, she used to save the National Enquirers just for me. So I get to see the pictures of people run over by trains and such. So anyway, this would have been 1984. And my mom's visiting, and my Aunt Rosie says, "So, how is Bobby?" Because I was known as Bobby to my family. "How is Bobby?" She goes, "Aunt Rosie, you have to call him Dr. Greenberg now." And my Aunt Rosie, all 3'9" of her says, "What kind of doctor? Can he write a prescription?" And then she says, "How's Stevie, my younger brother?" She goes, "Aunt Rosie, you have to call him Dr. Greenberg." She says, "That's a doctor."
Yeah.
So yes, there's no respect for PhDs.
Yeah,
None
my
whatsoever.
buddy Rich he's a PhD also, and he's like, "Yes, I'm a doctor, but not the kind that can help anybody."
Correct. The famous New Yorker cartoon has the maitre d' in what is clearly a very exclusive restaurant with very few tables answering a telephone. And the maitre d' is saying to the telephone, "Is Dr. Jones a real doctor or merely a PhD?"
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Because you figure, the least you can do when you make reservations is you say, "This is Dr. Greenberg. Are you a real doctor or merely a PhD?" Okay, that hurts.
Wow.
That left a mark.
Yeah, that stings.
That left a mark. Yeah.
Thanks, Aunt Rosie.
Yeah. Yeah. Right, exactly. And look at all the good it did you. You died.
That's right. That's right.
Right.
You died.
Well, moving on. I don't want to speak ill of the dead.
No, and I'm never of my Aunt Rosie.
May she rest in peace.
May she rest in peace. She's still here
she
somewhere
rest in the
torturing someone.
Peacefulness of her cantankerousness.
Somewhere. Correct.
Hey, tell us what you're working on.
Well, I'm doing another Great Courses course, and that will be recorded in January and early February.
Where do you record these?
In Virginia, in Chantilly, Virginia, which is virtually next to Dulles Airport. Chantilly it's a great name, isn't it? I mean, it's French.
That's right.
It sounds like, like doilies and
Reminds me of
such.
the Big Bopper.
Right. Right. Exactly. And Chantilly, once upon a time, was the name of a huge plantation in that part of Virginia. It was Chantilly Plantation. And that name is now given to an area that's basically, just landing fields and industrial parks. But it's right next to Manassas Junction. And those folks of, fans of American history, which I am, Manassas is where, as the South calls the battles of Manassas were the battles of Bull Run. Bull Run 1 and Bull Run 2.
Or first Manassas, second Manassas.
Correct. And so that part of Virginia near DC, basically, I don't know what, some huge percentage of the Civil War was fought in those lands.
Right.
Between Manassas Junction and Fredericksburg and the wilderness area near Fredericksburg. I'm getting goosebumps talking about it.
There's a lot of American blood in that soil.
A lot of American blood, a lot of tragedy, a lot of tragedy right there. And, there's a huge issue in that part of the world right now. And I'm very unhappy about it, speaking for myself. They're paving over these battlefields. This land is valuable. As the DC suburbs stretch out further and further, as suburbs always do.
Right.
Land becomes more and more valuable, and a lot of this land is not protected parkland. The Bull Run battlefield is protected, but the Fredericksburg battlefield, for example, wasn't protected. Mm-hmm. And so there's a subdivision.
Wow.
There's a subdivision of tract houses, 3+ 3-bedroom, 2-bath houses, all across the field, where tens of thousands of Union soldiers were cut down, and others spent days still trying not to move. And it's just a subdivision.
Wow.
And more of these battle lands are being covered over because folks just don't have a sense of history. And I think that's really tragic.
It is tragic.
I think that's really tragic.
Pave battlefields, put up a parking lot.
Yeah. Oh, dude.
Sorry.
Hurtful.
Yeah. A row of $500,000 townhomes,
Yeah.
Right. Right. So anyway, I'm going back to Virginia to record a course that has been tentatively entitled Music as a Mirror history through music.
Okay. Is that your title or a title that because I know you kind of reached out and put the tentacles out and said, hey, everybody.
It's a combination of what folks contributed, and then the teaching company or the grade courses turned around and took our winners and then polled them and then came up with that. So I'm comfortable with that. It's not the title I would have chosen. My tentative title was Big History and Great Music. I
like that title better.
It's got fewer words.
Sure.
You know, and it's about history and it's about music and it's about big history. What is the big history behind these pieces?
That's right.
So the whole concept behind this course is that in the 24 lectures, every lecture deals with a piece of music, a single piece of music that is emblematic of some extraordinary historical event that occurred at the time the piece was written. And so it's more a history course than a music course. And some of these lectures range all over the place. So I'm doing a piece, for example, called the 1st of October, 1905, a piano sonata by Janáček, Leos Janáček, this wonderful Moravian-born composer. And it's about a riot that occurred on October 1st and 2nd of 1905, in which a young Moravian man was killed by German soldiers in the capital of Moravia, in a city called Brno. Because this was at a time when these areas that are now part of the Czech Republic were occupied by Austria and Germany. And after hundreds of years, the Czechs wanted their land back. Oh.
As they would.
Yeah. Oh, nervy of them, huh?
Yeah.
And so that lecture ranges all over the globe. I mean, I get up to 1948 because, 1945, the Second World War ends and the Czechs were the first country subjugated by the Germans even before the fighting started, even before the shooting started. The Germans managed to take much of what was Czechoslovakia in what was called they marched in 1938. So
I think they looked over in 1937 and said, it took the Czechs 100 years to get mad last time somebody took over. Let's just walk over there.
Well, there was a heavy German population. They called the Sudeten, the southern Germans, who lived in Czech lands. And so presumably, because this is what countries do when they crap around, we need to protect our own. We're doing this as protection. So in any case, the Czechs, who had been subjected to just extraordinarily vile treatment by the Nazis when the war ended in 1945, there was hell to pay. There was revenge. There was ethnic cleansing. There was a relocation of all those Sudeten Germans who had lived in Czech lands for hundreds of years. Millions of people were uprooted and sent back to Germany. It was I won't call it a second Holocaust because that's overvaluing it. But 3 million people were forcibly relocated with the death of about 500,000. And folks don't know about stuff like that. And this happened in 46, 47, 48. I mean, we think in the United States the war ended on May 5th of 1945 because that's the date, or May 8th. That's the date we celebrate as the end of the war. But in Europe, my goodness, the war didn't end for a long time.
Sure.
People, German prisoners in Russia were still being sent back to Germany as late as 1955, 10 years later.
Wow.
The peace with Germany was not made until the 1950s. I mean, we forget that war ended very slowly in reality. So back to the point. And then that lecture about this piece by Janáček written in 1905 ranges backwards as far as 1618,
wow.
which is when the Czechs pissed off the Austrians by throwing a bunch of Austrian ministers out the third-story window of the Hradčan Palace in Prague because the Austrians were making absurd demands on the Czechs. By the way, all the Austrians they threw out the window, 3 of them, they all lived because apparently they landed in a pile of horse manure. But this is what initiated the 30 Years' War, which ravaged Europe for the next 30 years. So Anyway,
3 Austrians getting thrown out of a second-story window into
Third-story
a pile
window.
of manure.
into a pile of crap. And I love that story.
A third-story window.
That's a setup for a joke.
That is.
3
That's
Austrians go flying.
an Austrian, and an Austrian.
Exactly.
Take off out a window.
Yeah.
Who lands first?
Right.
And the answer is not the soprano.
Right.
She had to stop and ask directions.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
I just threw that in as quick as I could.
Now listen, for those of you who aren't music nerds, I just by complete coincidence, when you say the word soprano, I think of my friend Heidi. She is blonde.
And she's smart? No.
She's lovely and she's blonde.
Okay.
Thank you, Heidi, for being lovely and blonde. She is a doll.
I know you can edit this, so you'll take this out if you need to.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but you're 18. You
See,
can handle this.
Yes, that makes you fair. That makes you fair game for being cannon fodder.
Correct. Well, her fodder is sitting right here, so I can say whatever I don't
Brenda,
please.
I am your father.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I always say to my son. He says, "Why do I have to go to sleep?" You go to sleep. Because I am your father. And I told you to. And he looks at me like, okay, now I need to cut his hand off. And I don't want to do that.
If you like the show,
And you know you do. Support the show.
there are 3 ways you can support us.
Number 1, go to iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you listen to podcasts.
And leave a 5-star rating and review.
It helps with the show metrics and it helps us get better placement. Number 2,
Visit our website.
www.breakitdownshow.com.
We've got an Amazon and an eBay link.
Same Amazon, same eBay, you know and love, but they give us a little kickback when you get to their site from ours. And number 3, leave comments about the shows that you like. We want to know what you think, how you feel.
Tell us how to make the show better. We greatly appreciate it.
Now back to the show.
Anyway, back to the story I was going to say.
You don't want to. You will if you have to. But you don't want to.
What's the difference between a Ferrari Dino and a soprano?
Please.
And the answer is, most men have never been in a Ferrari Dino.
Hey.
Wow.
Whoa.
Wow.
Whoa, hurtful. I hate myself.
God bless you.
I hate
Heidi.
myself.
Hate myself.
I'm working my self-loathing. And I'm just working it into the ground right now. So anyway, back to the new course that I'm doing. It's a course where a piece of music can be a trigger to a whole series of historical explorations. The amount of music I'm playing in each one is limited. I'm between 4 and 6 minutes of music and a 45-minute lecture. So it's really not so much about the music as the history around the music. But I'm very happy with the course. I've worked very hard on it.
Said differently, it's not about Dr. Bob's playing, but his verbosity.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Thank you, John.
But
It's about my freaking research, which has been epic.
You've been working on this for years.
I've been working on this for a lifetime. If you think about, if you go downstairs and look at my shelves, and I'll take you downstairs afterwards. I mean, this is what I read about. Sadly, I'm a war porno freak,
Downstairs is the dungeon. He's referred to it as Pelican Bay.
No.
And there are more martini shakers down there.
There are more martini shakers, cocktail shakers. Yes, indeed there are. But, you
may call them cocktail shakers, but I know what they're for.
Okay. John, speak truth. I must give you that. Many of the shakers were bought. During the salad days of my career, I was traveling to Europe 5, 6, 7 times a year to give talks and so forth. And I cultivated dealers all over Europe, but I would always stop in London on the way. Spend 2 days in London, get acclimated to the time change, visit my dealer friends, and do my thing. But the key was, if I was going to make a martini, because you can't pay, they sell the shakers, but they don't know how to do this in Europe. Mm-hmm. God bless them. We love the Europeans. They gave us our civilization, but we have so outstripped Europe, we meaning the United States. And we did that so long ago. I love Paris. I love Berlin. I love Barcelona. I love going to Western Europe. But we're in charge now. And that sounds so awful, but it's true. So, you can't expect them to make a decent martini. You can't. And if they do make a decent martini, like at the Savoy in London, they charge you £30, which is $45 for a drink.
For a martini.
Yes. Excuse me. Much as I love martinis, there is a limit.
Right.
And if it costs as much as a province in North Korea, it's too much. So
Yeah.
So the key when you travel to Europe is you need to buy a shaker as quickly as possible so you can make a martini in your room.
Properly.
So many of the shakers that you have observed, were bought as an expedient.
At the beginnings of trips to Europe.
As a necessity. Correct.
Terrific.
As a spiritual necessity.
Well, that makes the collection that much richer.
Thank you.
Because they were bought purposefully.
People ask me, have you actually used all of these? And my answer is no, but I've used enough of them.
Yeah. I get that. You go out there and you absolutely could go to the hotel bar and get a shitty martini.
Correct.
Or, you go see your guy and he gets you that thing
or you go to London and you go down to Chelsea Road when there used
Yes.
to be this amazing number of antique dealers on Chelsea Road, and you buy a martini a cocktail shaker, which has not been used since 1932. And it's got stuff, you pull off the cap and you look on the inside and oh my goodness. It's like there's orcs and there are, man-eating spiders and there are Ewoks and creatures that haven't been seen for eons.
Right.
And then you've got that tiny little bar of soap they give you in the hotel with which you've got to clean out this puppy. And this kind of faux hot water that passes for Euro hot water, that you got to use to kind of wash out the thing. So
the faux hot water that is the opposite of the 1 cube of ice that they give you when you order.
They do water so bad in Europe.
Yeah.
Mit gas? Not mit gas. Just water with ice. Mit gas? No, not mit gas. They always want to complicate.
And that's the other key. John has been clever enough to come up with the other key. Euro ice.
Oh, yeah.
Is a small chip of ice.
Yep.
That basically could
negligible, really.
Yeah. Yeah. An invention. A very small bug would not be chilled by that ice. And in a Motel 6 in Schenectady, and I don't know why I'm picking on Schenectady. I mean, in Ely and pick a town. There's an ice machine. Ice machines are really an invention sanctioned by God.
That's right.
And, so yes, ice is the key. Ice is always the key. Cold is the key. So yes, battlefield martinis will never be the same as home field martinis.
Yep.
But that's my attitude too. I mean, if you're in London, if you're in Paris, if you're in Verdun, you're working on the battlefield.
Sure.
And, I mean, you're military, you're Afghanistan.
Right.
You know what it's all about. There's certain things you can't demand from your environment.
I once had Britney Spears gin in Iraq, and it was the best gin I could have. So it was the best gin in the world.
Britney Spears gin?
Yeah, they put a sticker of Britney Spears on a clear bottle of gin. Yep, and I'm like, I'm drinking this. Get some grape juice from the chow hall so I don't got to taste it too much, and then I did it up. It was good.
There you have it.
Well, there's 2 martini stories that I have to chime in with because Dr. Bob so properly served us martinis that had maybe a scant few, maybe 3 or 4 tiny shards of the ice as it had been shaken. So those are a sign of a fine martini, but I tended bar when I was 22 or 23, and I've always respected the martini. So as a bartender, I learned how to make all the kitschy drinks, the sex on the beach and all of the fuzzy navels and all of that business. But I always respected the martini. And when somebody ordered one, I would do 2 things. The first thing is I would reach for a bottle of fine gin, and I worked at a hotel bar, so that bottle of fine gin was usually just the green bottle.
Correct.
Reach for that bottle.
Yeah.
They're not a sponsor of the show, so I didn't mention them by name, but since you did,
but
yes,
I mentioned it. It's a fine gin.
So I reached for that bottle, and there were 2 things that I was looking for, and that was for the orderer of the martini to acknowledge that I was reaching for the right bottle, or I knew he was a shitty orderer if he went, "Oh no, I'm looking for vodka." Yeah. And I'd know what I was dealing with. But sometimes I would just get, there was an author who stayed at the hotel one time. His name was Martin Levitt, and he was a drinker and he understood what he was doing. So he ordered the martini and I'd reach for the green bottle and he would just simply give me the single knowing nod. And that's when I knew I was dealing with a professional. The second story that I will tell is my wife, on our third date, we went to the pepper mill.
I love the pepper mill.
And I was suited up and we were doing it. And I took her to the pepper mill and
Was either of you wearing anything velour?
That's possible.
Oh, sorry.
It's just my recollection that keeps me from a firmer answer. But it's possible.
You were in love, dude. You were in love. Velour didn't matter at that point.
No.
But the pepper mill did.
In fact, it was favorable.
Here you go.
So I was, again, respectful of the martini, but pretty young. I was about 21, I think. And I ordered a Tanqueray martini on the rocks. And what was served to me was a large bucket glass with a proper martini in it. And I sat down by the fire as we waited for our table. And I drank that lovely martini and it was wonderful. And then the hostess came by and said, "Your table is ready." And I got up.
Boom.
And I had no idea where on the planet I was.
Yes.
I think the gravitational pull was a little different for me at that moment.
Yeah, you sat down on a mountain and forgot about it.
Oh, it was great.
There is a Dorothy Parker poem, which is worth reciting at this moment.
All right.
1 martini is dandy. 2 at the very most. After 3, I'm under the table. After 4, I'm under my host.
That's fantastic.
One must respect the power.
Respect the power. That's right.
Respect the power.
Glad we brought a little piece of the Algonquin round table.
I don't know why we're doing this. I mean, we sound like a bunch of freaking alkies here.
Yeah.
And that's not the intention. But there are certain pleasures, and I'm going to return this back to music now.
Oh, nice.
Well, there are certain pleasures that our experience and that our lives allow us. Some of them are frankly not yet legal and perhaps shouldn't be legal. An argument could be made that alcohol should not be legal. It should be regulated. An argument could be made.
That's true.
The bottom line is judiciously indulged. Any number of substances can open us up to divine influence and make us aware of things that our ordinary, uptight, daily selves would never acknowledge. A drink, a toke, a this or a that. Overindulged? Yes. It becomes a dangerous thing for our bodies.
Sure.
Judicious.
And our society.
And our society, thank you. But judiciously used, excuse me, it's a blessing. It's a blessing, for goodness sake. And music is exactly the same thing. We're hardwired to make music. We're hardwired to appreciate and enjoy music. We're hardwired to communicate via music.
Absolutely.
We're hardwired to be elevated by music and to experience things through others that we could never have experienced through ourselves.
Yes.
It bypasses, music does, certain language centers and enters immediately into our pleasure centers. And I'm not going to be trapped down by some scientist who says, please explicate that scientifically, because I can't. I'm a freaking composer. That's all I am.
And you need not.
Yeah,
you know what? I need not, because we all know
language.
that we all know the evidence is true.
That's right.
Right.
We all know the fact is you can listen to a piece of music, whether it's top 40 bubblegum or Beethoven, and we could suddenly transcend and be in an entirely different place.
And understand an emotion that another human being is conveying, regardless of what language they speak or how they grew up or their previous experience. There are certain human emotions that are universal and universally understood.
And we can experience revelation in a way we never could have done without the music as a catalyst. And so everything you say is true. And here is a gift. Here is an extraordinary evolutionary gift. I'm sure that given the time, we can explicate why this gift was given us, why in an evolutionary series of steps, this musical impulse has become so primarily important to us as humans. And explicate it we should. But for now, I just celebrate it, for goodness sake.
Even when you can explain it, you still got things you can't account for, like that German monk walking up to the church in the middle of the night, probably has a bunch of glühwein in his belly, and he's like, I'm going to write a song called Silent Night. And it's going to be good in any language, you know?
For centuries to come.
Yes. Willie Nelson's going to get a gig where he's riding on a bus for 6 weeks, and he writes the 3 biggest songs of his career, you know, Crazy and all these other songs, just in that moment of brilliance. And so it's hard to say, well, why can't he do it better now? He's obviously a better songwriter now, but those songs happened then in that moment, and it's hard to find a way to explain that.
No, I was going to say it's a small miracle. It's not a small, it's a big miracle.
Yes.
It's a big miracle. The miracle of music it's something we take for granted because, you know, from the first moments we're alive, our mothers sing lullabies to us. We hear music.
That's right.
And so it becomes a given in our lives, an absolute, a baseline. But yet, it doesn't feed us. I mean, if we ask ourselves, what are the imperatives that we require for survival?
Right.
The imperatives we would say are
warmth,
food, shelter, reproduction.
Right.
Well,
I will say that music has definitely helped me reproduce.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Indigada Davida, dude.
So let's not take that for granted.
Okay. All right. Well, but here you go.
Thank you, Marvin Gaye.
Oh, it was Marvin.
Well, he could say thank you, Dwayne Wiggins, just down
I
the hill.
could say
from where
thank
we
you,
are.
thank you, Dwayne Wiggins, whose humble abode we recorded our last show at.
Really?
But we could also say, I could say thank you, Billy Idol.
I was going to say you heard it through the grapevine.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are a number of things that I think a limited number of things, and some people, some of the less enlightened, could exclude music from the list of essentials. But really, what we're talking about here is not just the ability to breathe in and out and exist on the planet, but the ability for human beings to create an existence where there is meaning. And that is absolutely rooted in music. Because we can go back and look at cave paintings. Unfortunately, there was no way to go back and have any of the music that was created back then captured.
And here they're chanting. You're right.
Right.
You're right. Because
But we know that it existed.
Because chant they had to.
Absolutely.
Correct. We have flutes. I mean, you know, we have the instruments they made, the bone flutes and such. But we don't.
Somebody stretched the skin over something.
Correct. And someone sang.
Right.
Because singing is the most natural thing in the world. You know,
And I would argue that singing came before talking.
well, or I would argue that they were at least simultaneous.
Right.
Because what's the difference? I mean, in some languages, like Chinese, where you have a pitched language, singing and language are essentially
walk
the
hand
same
in hand.
thing.
Yeah.
Correct. So depending on where we're talking about and who we're talking about, there is no differentiation. Music simply becomes an intensification of one thing, and theater becomes an intensification of the language. But they are one and the same. Theater and music are always one and the same. I've got, as you guys have observed, I've got a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old in this house right now. Well, the 8-year-old, my daughter, sings everything. When she's playing, when she's working, when she's doing her homework, but she's always singing. When she's practicing her piano, because she's a good piano player, she's always singing. She's always singing. It's the most natural thing in the world for her. It's pure opera, because that's what opera is, right? Opera is the intensification of human drama through music. And we're hardwired to do so. The language impulse and the singing impulse, the musical impulse, they are all of a single quality. And I think it's wonderful. And it should liberate us, because frankly, we get so uptight as grown-ups. Oh, I can't sing Happy Birthday. I sound so bad. I'm tone deaf. I'm blah, 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 blah. Every now and then, we do hear from someone who has no affinity to music. Historical personages. But really, they are few and far between. An affinity for music is an affinity for life as we understand it. And that's really wonderful. And it means that all music is applicable. Not just the pop songs we grow up with, which are our coming of age. All music is applicable. It all has the power to move. Okay. Lily, no singing. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
My Lily wants to sing.
And you know, what you mentioned brings me back to a Cameron Diaz movie. I don't remember the name of it, but I think it was My Best Friend's Wedding, where there was a scene where she sings, they're in a karaoke bar, and somebody gives her the microphone and she sings terribly and wonderfully.
Yes.
And that's what it's all about. Is that her expression of music at that moment was not technically perfect. It was not pleasurable if you look at it from a technical standpoint, but her ability to emote at that moment was perfect.
I mean, what a wonderful gift. What an extraordinary gift. I mean, we all want to be rich. We all want to win the lottery. We all want to have this and that and never have to worry about stuff again. But I don't know. You know, I have to say I'm the same way as everybody. I got little kids. I'm 61 and I need to keep earning a living, blah, 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 blah. But all I need to do is spin some Beethoven symphonies. If I want to forget who I am, I don't need to do it. I don't need meditation. I just need to listen to some Dead Germans and I'm good. And, you know, other people might need to listen to the Beatles. Other people might need to listen to the Stones or whatever. It makes no difference. The music helps us to transcend our daily issues, and it helps us to enter into a place, a common place of experience and joy that we don't have access to without the freaking music. And that's the miracle.
That's right.
That's the miracle. You know, today I'm downstairs, so I know you guys are coming. I'm polishing shakers. Okay. Here's my stupidity, right? I got 450 shakers in this house. I'm worried. Oh my God. You know what? Pete and John are coming and there's tarnish on some of these damn
They
things.
might see this one.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. They'll think I'm a bad person. So I'm downstairs polishing shakers. And what am I doing? I'm listening to Oscar Peterson because the piano player, the jazz pianist.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a jazz piano player, but I ain't Oscar. No one's Oscar.
Well, you don't have 24 fingers.
No, that's very true. And I'm just listening to Oscar. Hey, listen, when Oscar died a couple of years ago, I shed real tears.
Yeah. I did too.
He was my man.
He was magical.
You know, and when Dave McKenna died before him, I shed tears. These were heroes of mine.
I don't know Dave McKenna, but I did shed a tear when Oscar Peterson died. I shed a tear when Art Tatum died too.
All right, then you need to know more. You need to know some Dave McKenna. Because Dave McKenna was a freaking monster. And such a beautiful man and a sweet man. And you know, just what a player. What a player. And you know, I'm interested in, you know, listen, I love Chick Corea and I like Keith Jarrett.
Uh-huh.
And I can go on and on about all the pianists I like, but
Herbie
what I really need, well, you know, for 8 years, my private composition student was Tony Williams, the drummer.
Yes.
Who worked with Herbie.
I know
for a
that
million years.
because I love Tony Williams.
And Tony always referred to me as Dr. Greenberg because it gave him cachet by saying, and Tony's death was a tragedy and blah, blah, blah. But what Tony told me was that in the jazz community, they always called Oscar Peterson, they called him Hercules.
That makes sense.
They called him Hercules because he was freaking Hercules.
That's right. He could do things no other human
He was
could do.
Hercules, exactly. Yeah. He played the piano the way the best concert pianist plays the piano. And, ordinarily, concert players, let's face it, concert players, concert singers, opera singers, they're really just better.
Yeah.
They're better because they're trained up the wazoo, because from the youngest age, they have disciplined themselves. I mean, I'm asked all the time, what do you think of Frank Sinatra? Wasn't he a great singer? And I want to say, yes, I love Frank Sinatra's diction. And wasn't he a great singer? I said he had a beautiful sounding voice. Wasn't he a great singer? He's always a shitty singer. For God's sake. Every time he went above that sixth, that was his range, he's out of tune.
That's it.
He sounds like shit.
Right.
His voice strains to death. The man had no, what we call tessitura. He had no range whatsoever. He smoked and he drank and he never worked his voice. He never trained his voice. He abused his voice and it sounded like crap. So you know what? Excuse me. Let's stay within the yellow lines. And the yellow lines is what Frank Sinatra did was cool. But don't compare him to a professional singer, for goodness sake. You want to compare him to Pavarotti, to Domingo? Excuse me, you want to compare him to a real singer? He is nothing but a low-end chanteuse, period. And, when we start talking about high-end piano players, and I mean that, high-end piano, there's no more high-end musician on the planet than a high-end piano player. I mean, you start talking about a great pianist, these people are like those Romanian gymnasts who do things with their bodies that are virtually impossible to imagine. I mean, they're capable of doing stuff that none of us can conceive. But Oscar Peterson was at that level.
Yeah.
And, you know what? It's not all about technique, but Oscar also had the imagination.
Well, he embodied both. I mean, he really did have technique that was superb.
He had
superior.
He had all the technique, but he also had the improviser's ability to converse with his audience.
Right.
To talk.
And he did it not only with his fingers, but with his body, and he did it with his, he put his imagination in your hands.
Correct. And it's a high-end art. Yeah. But so did Dave McKenna, and that's why you need to know about Dave McKenna. Dave McKenna was a miracle. And why Dave McKenna never became famous, I'm not quite sure. Maybe it's because he just kept playing in bars in Boston. He fancied himself a saloon pianist. And that's what he called himself. I'm just a saloon pianist. So he never got on the big stage, although he used to come here to San Francisco all the time and play at the Great American Music Hall. But Dave McKenna.
A lovely stage, but not the big stage.
Yep. Roger Kellaway. Do you know Roger Kellaway's work?
No.
Yeah, I have work to do with you guys.
All right.
I'm going to do some work.
Yeah.
I mean, as a pianist, I want to hear what you can do with two hands. There's lots of people who can play one hand and comp with their left.
Right.
That's basically what passes for jazz piano. And I'm not taking anybody down. But really, what made Keith Jarrett famous? His Cologne concerts. His solo concerts. That's what made Keith Jarrett famous. What makes, for me, Chick Corea the most wonderful pianist of our generation? His solo albums. Not The Return for Forever. Not even his trio work. And his trio work is great.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I love Chick Corea.
Sure.
But his solo stuff is a miracle.
I've seen him right down the street at Yoshi's 3 times.
Oh, I love Chick Corea.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm crazy. He makes fantastic decisions.
Yeah.
And
that's what, when we talk among music nerds, I think what separates the good from the great are the decisions, the choices.
He makes great choices because, when you're improvising, that's what it's all about. You're having a conversation, the likes of which we're having now.
Right.
And hopefully Everybody listening to this conversation is going to say, whoa, those dudes are making great conversational choices. I mean, they went from Chantilly, Virginia and the Civil War to the teaching company, and they went to blah, 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 blah.
And Martinis. We stopped at Martinis.
We stopped, well, having gone way too long. But okay, but we did eventually.
That's all going to make the cut, by the way.
Yeah, we did eventually stop. But the bottom line is the conversation has ranged over a wide field of stuff, all interconnected, all organically related, all relevant to the larger conversation, which is why should we celebrate life through music?
Absolutely.
And that's really what it all comes down to.
And the series you're working on now, to tie it all together, is really about the understanding of history through music. And emotionally speaking, it's really very similar to the way that we celebrate life through music.
And that's the whole point of the course is to find pieces of music that reflect contemporary events, to talk about those contemporary events, and then double back on the piece of music and how that piece of music interprets in a way contemporary what just happened. So the two pieces of music I leave out, and I talk about it right away, because the most obvious piece is the one I don't do, which is,
I don't know. You gotta tell me.
the 1812 Overture.
Okay.
Right?
It's even got a
There's
date.
a lot of choices.
It's even
but
got
I
a
know
date.
I was crapping
That's
with you
what
guys.
makes it. That's what makes it
No,
obvious.
I was crapping with you because, isn't that just like total bullshit? That was an academic game.
Yeah.
Here's the academic game. I have already decided what the only answer is.
Right.
And now I'm going to, after having arrived at that answer over weeks or months, and now I'm going to throw it out at all of you. And as if you're going to come up with it immediately. And then I tell you, this is the answer. And I look smart. It's
Lay people, by the way, to flatter us.
total crap. So you'll excuse me for playing that bullshit academic game. And I know it's BS.
We'll play along.
It's all right. You're generous people. But anyway, I'm not doing the 1812 Overture because it was written in 70 years after 1812.
That's right.
And it was just written to cash in. And Tchaikovsky knew he was cashing in and he was ashamed of it.
Yeah.
He said it's a piece of crap. It's the worst piece I ever wrote. And he's right. It was. But it didn't make any difference. It's still the most popular piece he ever wrote. And ain't that a what? Because,
But I'm going to cash in on the 1812 Overture, and then I'm going to hang out with these shirtless dudes.
well, yeah.
But never mind that.
Or
right.
pantsless dudes,
Right.
as the case may be. But all right.
It's all right though. If you write popular music and it allows you to do what the fuck you want to do otherwise, you should do that.
Yeah.
And there you have it. But I'm not doing that because that's a piece of music that was not written in immediate response, but was written many, 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 many years later. And the other piece I'm not doing is this very famous piece by Krzysztof Penderecki called Threnody to the Victims of Hiroshima, which was written in 1960. But his original title was like 8 minutes and 45 seconds. That was his original title.
Wow.
And not until he heard it performed, and really not until the Polish authorities, that ran his life decided, no, we need to dedicate this to the Western destruction of a Japanese city. It was all politics to call that piece Threnody to the Victims of Hiroshima.
That was like Eddie Van Halen when he titled the instrumental piece on the album Women and Children First.
Yeah.
Tora, Tora, Tora.
Oh, that one.
Because he thought it harkened back to the experience of those folks who had survived Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The original title for that piece was, "Hey, you guys, check out this whammy bar."
Oh, go away.
Anyway, sorry.
Are you serious? Are you just messing with us? Okay. Okay. Dude.
That's my version of an intellectual game.
Dude's messing with us. I should have known it. But anyway, so I'm not doing those pieces. I have to do pieces that were sincerely written in response to historical events.
Right.
So that I can talk about those historical events.
Yeah.
So it's more a history course than a music course. And I'm working on second draft now.
But the music gives us context.
The music gives us context.
I'd like to do two things. One is if we could just take a brief break and see where the sun is from your
Okay.
back deck, because
It's
you have a
behind the-
lovely back
We
deck.
have a 3-bridge view, but I fear that the fog has interfered with our lives.
Well, we may see that. But the other thing I want to do, and this may or may not make the cut, is tell a Frank Sinatra story because you brought him up. And this really speaks to my level of regard for Frank Sinatra as a singer. He's from Hoboken, New Jersey. And that's right. Some of it
in Jersey.
That's right. We've had a Jersey boy in our midst. Chaz Palminteri is from Hoboken, New Jersey. And when he became renowned as a filmmaker and actor, he always thought, one of these days I'm going to meet Frank Sinatra. And I'm going to say, hey, Frank, we're both from Hoboken. And so he got his chance. He met Frank Sinatra.
Did he blow him off?
And he said, hey, Mr. Sinatra, I'm also from Hoboken. And Frank Sinatra said to him, congratulations, kid. You'll always be the second most famous person from Hoboken.
Have you heard the Don Rickles Frank Sinatra story?
I have not.
Oh, this is worth telling. So Frank and Don are at the same casino in Vegas, and
Probably the Sahara or the Sands.
working shows and everything. Right. And Don sees Frank and says, "Hey, listen, I got a couple friends in town. It'd be really cool if you came by and just said hi, And Frank, their buddies is like, yeah, no problem, I'll do that. So they're sitting down, and Don's eating, entertaining his friends, and Frank comes up and says, "Hey, Don," and he's like, "Frank, look, we're eating dinner here. Get out of here!" He kicks Frank to the road. Totally set him up. And the thing is,
What a setup.
Frank would tell the story. He loved it so much. I mean, the whole thing was so hilarious, because Don Rickles is damn funny.
Can't you see we're eating dinner,
Can't
Frank?
you see we're busy over here? Come on.
Always interrupting my meal.
From Hoboken, aren't you?
Yeah.